Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Shaykh Osamah. Very nice to have you with us. For everyone else, alhamdulillah, I'm honored today to have with me a dear friend and scholar, Shaykh Osamah Salhiya, who is the Imam of the Islamic Center of Passaic County in New Jersey. Alhamdulillah, he's the Imam of one of the most vibrant communities in the country. And Shaykh Osamah has been studying and teaching Islam for years. Alhamdulillah, I hope to benefit, inshallah, from his insights on this topic. Our topic today is going to be about how does the average person navigate scholarship and the many opinions that are out there. This is a problem that is unique to our times. So if we look back, subhanAllah, the last 100 years, we've witnessed so much change in the world that has not been there in the past. We've witnessed the globalization, industrialization, the printing press, which made books accessible to people. The Quran has been translated in so many languages, hadith books. And then we have the rise of the internet and then Google and the introduction of the iPhone. And subhanAllah, now we have AI, right? Shaykh Osamah, I wanted to maybe just ask you if you can give us some insights into how has the internet and AI and just this access to information changed the way scholarship functions today compared to the past?
جزاك الله خير دكتور عماد، الله يحفظكم ان شاء الله. اعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاه والسلام على سيدنا محمد اشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين. It's truly an honor to be with you, Dr. Imad. جزاك الله خير for the invitation, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our efforts and accept from us and use us for goodness. Allahumma ameen. Navigating scholarship is a really important subject to reflect on. And there, as you said, there are a lot of different challenges because of the way that we communicate today and access information. Not to mention, I guess you could say the system or methodology of seeking knowledge between past and present has greatly changed. Now we have a lot of different ways to communicate with scholars, online, Zoom, correspondence, long distance learning, and not to mention just because of the pace that life is at, not many people have the ability or the time or the interest to actually sit down and systematically learn like the scholars of our past learned. And I'll never forget a meme I saw. It was pretty funny. There was two pictures. One picture of a scholar in a massive library to the right, and it said, and there was a caption that said, "With it, I dedicated the last 40 years of my life to reading these books and studying them." And the one on the left was a young person with a drink in front of a laptop and said, "I looked up the answers to everything on Google in 5 minutes." So
this is true.
Yeah, subhanallah.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's definitely changed. We have more access but less knowledge. That's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, subhanallah. Yeah, like even me myself, like I was just thinking, now we have like there's information and there's knowledge, right? These are two different things. And if you ask something online or you ask AI, it'll give you an answer. But subhanAllah, there's not that relationship with an actual research, right? So I remember when I was doing my PhD, I would want to look up one issue and then I'll go to a book, and that book will take me to another book. And to look up one issue, you end up reading 12 books, right? And then subhanAllah, you have this relationship with that knowledge that's acquired that's missing from the just Googling it, right? Even though you may get the same answer, right? You may get that same answer, but there's something missing in that process of actually experiencing the book and sitting with it and whatnot. So I guess if we look at the average layperson, right, this is someone who's sincere, who really wants to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, and they want to follow this to the best of their opinion. But they're being pulled in so many directions, right? There's the TikTok video, there's the internet, there's the khatib, there's the motivational speaker. Where does this person begin? Like, how do they even begin navigating all of these different voices?
Look, I think in our scholarly tradition, there is a human element that can't be canceled out. It can't be replaced, and That's why we learn from our scholars that the importance of the oral transmission and isnad.
Mhm.
And the Prophet ﷺ himself was the companions' first teachers, and they were teachers for the next generation after that. So this isnad, this continuous link from generation to generation, is critical because it's not just about the information when it comes to Islamic knowledge. It's about a lifestyle. It's about learning how to apply that to circumstance. Which requires a lot of wisdom and life experience, and AI is not going to get that.
Mhm.
So, if the Islamic tradition was just information, maybe AI could help replace some of these things, but it doesn't. And that's why the scholars, they warned, don't take your knowledge from لا تأخذ علمك من صحفي. Don't take your knowledge from one who's only gained it by do-it-yourself methods through reading books. ولا مصحفك من مصحفي. And don't take your mushaf or your knowledge of recitation from someone who's self-taught the art of recitation. So I think where it starts for someone who is newly accessing our beautiful tradition is the human element. I need to figure out some way to gain access to authentic knowledge, whether it's my local imam or a local teacher who studied with people, someone who has an ijaza, a license in a different one of the sciences. So that's one element in it, the human element. I think another aspect is to know what to study and when to study it. So there's a lot to say about that. Like what should I give priority to in terms of my knowledge? Well, the scholars, they teach us there's something called ulum al-ala and ulum al-ghaya. There's tool sciences and then there's objective sciences. So if I want to become someone who has a depth of understanding and can access the knowledge from its sources, then I need to have the tool sciences. Tool sciences are like what? Arabic language is one. Usul al-fiqh for fiqh is another. Usul al-hadith for hadith is another. The mustalah, yani the science of hadith methodology. These are tool sciences that you study when you get first access to knowledge. That's again, like, if you're a layperson and you're not trying to become a scholar, the other thing I would say is there is something called a fard ain in terms of your seeking of knowledge. There's something that every Muslim needs to know. Fard ain is an individual obligation. Fard kifaya is a community obligation. That's not, not everyone needs to learn the ins and outs of tajweed, for example. That's a fard kifaya.
Mhm.
But a fard ain would be something relating to my personal practice, and this is going to gradually increase as my responsibilities in life increase. So when I'm younger, it's going to start with fasting and salah and tahara, the rulings of these ahkam. When I gain money, it's going to incorporate zakah as well, and then when I gain the ability, it's going to add on hajj. When I seek to get married, it's going to it's going to be about my fard ain individual obligations. Also going to include learning the rights of marriage, the rulings of marriage, and also the rulings of divorce. When I'm gonna, work in the financial market, it's about learning the rules of halal income and what is haram income and how to avoid it, and so on and so forth. So I would say that it's much more beneficial for a Muslim to first pursue gaining the knowledge of their fard ain, as opposed to trying to answer the bigger questions that are often found on fatwa websites or that are facing the ummah as a whole, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. In terms of this ijaza and the personal connection, how does even so I think you're talking about two different types of people, right? One is going to be like a student of knowledge, and then you have the layperson who's not going to have any of this, right? The layperson is just the person who works 9 to 5. Maybe he'll know his salah and whatnot, but let's just say they encounter a financial issue and they need to learn it, but now where do they go, right? Most people today are going to go online because that's just what's convenient. Not everyone's going to have access to a mujtahid or a scholar easily. So I guess for I guess I have two questions. One is that how does one know who to ask? Because they sometimes don't know who a scholar is, right? They see a khatib on a minbar who may not have any qualifications, but he's a khatib, he's a nice speaker, right? Or they see someone who has a large following online. So how do they even know who a scholar is, and is there anything on their part that is required of them in this process?
Well, look, Jazakallah khair, like really big questions that have a lot of applications in our lives. Jazakallah khair. But I think for starters, it's about committing to a lifestyle.
Mhm,
If I have not committed to a lifestyle of learning and seeking, then of course, when I face a really, really tough question relating to something in finance, I'm not going to have anyone to turn to because I don't have a big scholar in my back pocket or on speed dial or something like that. But
mhm,
if I commit to a certain lifestyle, then I will have some type of connection with a center of learning. Imams, teachers, people who have studied. But if I don't commit to that lifestyle, then of course I'll be stumped when I face a tough issue. So I would suggest that before you get to that point where you have a really tough question that you don't know how to answer, try to commit some time to learning the deen. It'll lead to a much more beautiful, deeper experience with Islam if it's based on awareness, not just based on blind following.
mhm,
So that's what I'd say for starters. But if you're in that situation where you have not done this, and you're trying to make a lifestyle change but you haven't yet, then I would say the best place to start is by seeking what's available locally, and don't limit yourself to one resource. Now, I often did this in the process of learning. If I had a question, I would ask multiple teachers just to see what the response is,
mhm,
and you'll often find, you know, um, I guess you could say a certain trend in the response to the question that'll give you more certainty and conviction that this is true. The problem is if I just commit to one individual, I don't know if they're knowledgeable or not. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they haven't studied the issue or whatever it is. But
mhm,
once I diversify who I ask,
mhm,
then it'll give more potential for the answers that I'm getting to be verified. Because, as you said, it's not like every locality has a scholar in every subject
mhm. Yeah.
to just be able to answer the question. So that's what I would suggest. I would strongly urge not to depend and rely on online sources. Not to say that there's nothing good online. There are good things online, but if you're not someone who's aware, you will not be able to distinguish between what's good and what's bad, what's a verified website, what's not.
Mhm.
Wallahu alam.
Yeah. So when we say online, I mean, it doesn't have to be like a website. It could be even like this conversation itself is online, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I guess the question is then, this person, when we say they need to learn and build this lifestyle, what does this lifestyle look like, right? What do you, because we're talking here about the lay person who's not a scholar, who's not, yeah, and they just pray their farida. Maybe they don't even read and write. Let's just say a average, you know, simple older person, and they have a question, right? They don't have they don't have the contacts to, you know, many mashayikh, especially in parts of the world or parts of the country where the demographic of Muslims is very small.
Yeah, so I would say there is a ton of content from really good resources
Mhm.
online, like you said, like recordings, lectures, teaching institutes, and so on and so forth. And here, why do I say don't wait till you have a question? Because I teach fiqh and I have Q&As in my community.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you this: the Q&As, they always have the same exact questions
Mhm.
that end up coming up. It's like a cycle.
Yeah.
And like, had those individuals who ask these questions in the Q&As simply attended a fiqh course,
Mhm.
they would not ask these questions once, twice, and thrice. Like what? Like questions relating to travel, student loans,
Yeah.
halal meat, buying a house. These are questions that are always asked in these Q&As, the same exact questions. So my advice would be, all right, if you can't attend a live class, then maybe you can find a series from someone who's reliable that taught it online, and maybe you can listen to the explanation of the book, write down questions, and then wait until you find the opportunity to ask the right people.
Mhm.
And so it's not going to be easy, like you said, some places. But I remember, even at a certain point in my studies, while I was in Egypt, I actually relied on this method because I couldn't find a teacher for certain subjects.
Mhm.
And then, alhamdulillah, I was able to find. But until I found, I was spending hours on end listening to recordings and taking notes on them.
Mhm.
It requires effort. That's simply what it is. If you're someone who stays very far from this reality, then no matter what I say, you're always going to get confused if you just wait till you have a question that stumps you.
Yeah. So you mentioned also the ijaza, and again, I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to put myself in the layperson's shoes. Um, they haven't done what you've done, right? But let's just say they go to someone and this person says I have an ijaza, right? But even this question of ijaza today is a difficult and complicated one, because subhanallah, I've seen people who have gotten an ijaza and they started giving ijaza, and when you ask them, they said, well, I've only listened to this person for a few hours. I've attended a 3-hour course and he's given me an ijaza, and now he is giving ijazas, right?
Yeah,
uh, but the average layperson, number one, doesn't even know what an ijaza means, right? Doesn't know what entails, doesn't have the guts to go to someone and ask them, can you tell me more about your ijaza?
yeah.
Where you study, how long? And this can sometimes fool people. So I guess I want you to shed light on both the problem that the layperson encounters in this regard, and the problem of this person who takes this quote unquote ijaza. We'll call it ijazat baraka, right? And he begins making it an authority of himself out of it.
Look, this is one of the challenges of our time. Like, yeah, there's very, very little censorship when it comes to this. This time that we live in. Like, anyone who could grab a mic is going to say what's on their mind. There's no one that anyone could do to change that reality. So it's one of the tests of our time. And the Prophet ﷺ actually tells us it's one of the features of end of times, when people will take those who are ignorant as leaders, and they will ask them, and they will give a response without knowledge, and they will misguide others, and they themselves are misguided. So it's one of the features of end of times. It's a reality that we live in. How can I know? So one of the conditions that the scholars put for a mujtahid is that he is known to the scholarly community, not that he's prominent or famous or that has a lot of Facebook followers. Very different. So that his knowledge is verified in some way. This verification could come through them getting a degree from a recognized institution. It could be from them being some type of part of some type of scholarly body, like a fatwa committee or a fiqh council or something like that. But there needs to be some way that gives me more. And if I don't have that, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask. I'm not going to just rely on one opinion. Like, perhaps if it was someone who was a recognized scholar, I may perhaps rest assured with that one response. But
Mhm.
otherwise, I'm going to ask a lot of different people who are linked, I guess, to scholarship,
Mhm.
and see if the answer that they give is consistent. Then it's going to give me a little bit more confidence. But need to connect with some type of learning institute. There's a bunch of them out there throughout the different states, wherever you go, California, Texas, um, Chicago, our locality in New Jersey, wherever you go, you're going to find some type of teaching institute, some local fiqh council. If that person is completely obscure to those of knowledge, then I'm not going to say they don't have knowledge, but it's just going to make me a little bit more concerned just to completely rely on their answer.
SubhanAllah. So I guess what you're saying is that there's an ijtihad that's required on the part of the layperson, that he must use his judgment too, right? He's not going to know for sure 100%, because he doesn't have the qualifications to actually know. But
Yeah.
he can look at, what do other scholars say about this person? Again, is he on some kind of fiqh council or not? What is his, even maybe his level of piety and taqwa might have some a role in this, in terms of taking the fatwa. Maybe also a scholar who has studied two subjects, like a scholar who's a has a degree in Islamic studies and economics, maybe will be more reliable in a fatwa and economy or finances versus someone who's just studied, for example, tafsir, right? Um, so that's what I hear you saying, right? That there's a level of ijtihad that's required.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, similar to what we do when you go to a doctor, right? How do you know which doctor to go to, right? You go online, you look at reviews, you make sure they are board certified, you know, no history of malpractice, you ask other people, and then you just have, you can never really know, but you have this experience with them, right? You go
Yeah.
to their office, they sit and they explain to you. You can never really understand everything they're saying from a medical perspective, but subhanAllah, you get this, the way they speak and the way they treat you and what their reputation is gives you a sense of either unease or ease, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, this is the advice of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ in the Hadith says, "Istafti qalbak wa in aftaka an-nas aftawk." You know, seek counsel from your heart and your conscience, even if people were to give you fatwa and give you answers and responses. Seek counsel with your conscience. So. You know, and of course, this is a very unique problem that we face in the West, as Muslims in the West, by the way. This is a
Yeah.
very unique problem. Like if you go to the Muslim world, you may agree or disagree with the opinions that are coming out, but there is some level of control of the religious rhetoric that's coming out of some of our Muslim countries.
Mhm.
But you may disagree with the conclusions or the opinions or what's being said. But nonetheless, unless you talk about something that's politicized. If it's politicized, then obviously it may be influenced by the politics of the country. But if someone is like teaching, if someone is you know, coming online, everyone, if they say something that's very aberrant or abnormal, like the entire scholarly community of that area will speak out against this person. And I've seen it. It's happened in Egypt. There's a few characters that came, you know, in you know, I guess you could say the national media, and they brought some very obscure opinions to the table, and all of the scholars of the country spoke out against these individuals for their opinions and saying how obscure these opinions are. So that's the benefit of having some type of system in place, which we really don't. Like we don't have. We have some think tanks, teaching institutes. It's getting there, inshallah. It's a lot better than it used to be a few decades ago. But yeah.
Yeah, subhanallah, this is a good point. I haven't really, even though I wrote a book on one of these topics of, you know, two of them actually. One is like a hadith, like there are some hadith rejectors that came out in Egypt, and all of these books were just response to them, right? There was like a dozen or so books that were just response to a person who came out and said we don't have to follow hadith, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, do you think that some of these things could be like in America we don't have this, right? So sometimes
Yeah.
you have. You know, again, someone who is just maybe a nice speaker. We call him like Ustad, or we will call him a motivational speaker or something like this. Do you think there should be some kind of, um, I guess, rules or guidelines for organizations or messages about who to give a platform and who to kind of be a little wary of in this regard?
Of course, and of course, I definitely do think there should be rules and policies, and you know, I think that that's coming to the attention of you know, there's a growing awareness on this, you know, for different reasons. So obviously, the you know, knowledge is only one benchmark. It's not the only one. You might find someone who is knowledgeable, but then abuses that knowledge and abuses their position, and it creates some type of community scandal or something like that. You know, sometimes it's again the opposite, where there's no knowledge, you know, but again, like a good speaker, and then because there's no knowledge, it ends up leading to, you know, you know, very negative results, very strange opinions that are coming out of that person, and then, you know, it leads to controversy in another way. So I think there's a growing awareness of this, but I would say knowledge and taqwa are two important benchmarks.
Mhm.
I think that our Muslim community is perhaps doing this here because of lack of resources. There, you don't find many. There's not enough resources to cover all of the need.
Mhm.
So, in the end of the day, people are going to just value whatever's going to help them get them by. A
Yeah.
good speaker, a good orator, like they say, or
Yeah.
whatever. When when they're looking for an imam of a masjid, they're not necessarily looking for someone who's knowledgeable, but
Yeah.
someone who can, I guess, so
Speak
I
well and maybe
yeah,
have some Quranic recitation or something along
yeah,
these lines. Yeah.
exactly.
So at the same time, Sheikh Osama, I think there's another side to it, which is that you have a lot of shabab and young people who also want to train, right? They're not, they might be 17, 18, 19 years old. And, you want to build, I guess, people who can speak or people who can do this. But at the same time, there is a dangerous ground where there it may be maybe giving someone a platform without any kind of spiritual guidance at the same time. So maybe out of giving the platform, there becomes like ujub and ghurur, like the person becomes self-obsessed and whatnot and a little arrogant. How do you suggest that people build scholars here in America and build young leaders in America
Um,
with also gradually guiding them into the spotlight?
yeah, again, a really big question. I would say, you know, um, everything in our culture is pushing in the other direction. It's not very. The process of learning is not a very glamorous one. It's a slow one. It takes time, effort, sacrifice, and that's why Imam Shafi'i, he said, uh, whoever doesn't taste uh, the humiliation of seeking knowledge for an hour will taste the bitterness of ignorance the rest of their life, and they might not even know. They might not even realize. So there's another line that says. لا تحسب الفقه تمرا أنت آكله. You don't think that fiqh is like eating some dates. It's as easy and sweet as that. لن تلعق الفقه حتى تلعق الصبرة.
Mhm.
You will not taste fiqh until you taste the bitterness of eating the sabr,
Yeah.
cactus fruit.
So I think this also like goes back to like the original point I kind of mentioned is that like subhanAllah, when you're learning, right? You go through a difficult process of just like even like you said, you asked multiple scholars, you were looking for a teacher, you traveled, right? You experienced the difficulty of learning, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or someone looking at, for example, many books to reach a, and asking scholars to read to find something. These days, someone may argue, you know what? Why should I put myself through that when it's just the answer is right there on, online? Um,
Right. Well, who put it there? And is that really the answer? Is it the only answer?
yeah.
These are like these are why these types of realities are exactly why there's so much confusion on religious issues
Mhm.
in our community. Not having the proper foundations that's why I'll never forget a statement Imam Abu Hanifa said, "Man arafa al-khilaf ittasa'a sadruh."
Mhm.
Whoever understands why scholars have differed, his chest will become wide open.
SubhanAllah.
Because it's not that you know that there's a difference of opinion, you understand why they're differing.
Yeah.
So the foundations are not in place. Again, uh, we live in a very fast-paced society.
Sheikh, I just ask you, is there an example? Let's just say the person. Can you give us an example of a simple ikhtilaf in fiqh and maybe explain very briefly why there's this two different opinions, and this way maybe we can have the average person just see, that these two opinions are not just coming from someone's mind, right? It's not like it's actually sometimes they're using the same, maybe even the same ayah or the same hadith. If
Mhm.
not, I mean, if nothing comes to your mind off the top of your head, we can, move on. But
يعني look, the why factor, like there's a lot of differences of opinion, but for us to get a good example of why, I would need to think a little bit.
Mhm,
But um uh you know for example, when it comes to travel,
mhm,
and traveler prayers, there's a lot of things among the scholars that are debatable, like for example, combining instead of just shortening. The
mhm.
Hanafi school just shortens prayers, it doesn't
Yeah,
combine them.
yeah.
And the Shafi'i school and the others, they combine and shorten,
Mhm,
providing that certain conditions are met. And then there's a different duration for how long you can do this shortening. All of this is being traced back to how these scholars define what travel is
mhm,
and how long does one stay as a traveler. So, for example, in the Shafi'i school, it would be for a period of 6 days, aside from the day of arrival and departure. For the Hanafi school, it'd be 15 days. Other scholars have said otherwise. As long as the meaning of traveler is applicable, then the ruling would apply. Um, and then the Shafi'i school, the Hanafi school did not combine because it's not mentioned in the Quran, and the Quran only mentions shortening. But the Shafi'i school shortens and combines based on what they understand from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you find that someone who doesn't understand this may do some fatwa shopping. So you know what? I want to follow the best of both. I want to shorten for a longer period, and I want to combine two. What's the big deal? There's opinion that says this and an opinion that says that, and I just cancel everything out. Or, for example, I'll give you another example where when it comes to credit cards, someone who is influenced by the teachings from a very conservative background will tell you, oh, credit cards are haram, completely haram. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And anyone who tells you otherwise is someone who's trying to change the deen. But then when you come and examine further, why is it that the mainstream opinion held by scholars today is that you can use credit cards as long as you use them responsibly, and that you pay it off during the grace period. The reason why they say this is because it is haram li ghayri. The credit card agreement is haram due to other cause. It's not haram in itself.
Yeah.
There's two categories. And what does that mean? There's something called sadd al-dhara'i'. Blocking off means to haram. So it is technically haram because it leads to something haram, because you're agreeing to pay interest under certain circumstances. So now it's not haram in itself, but they made it haram as a precautionary measure. Now, if there is a darura or a haja, a need or a necessity, and these are terms, right? They're not just like, blanket statements. There's actually certain benchmarks that define what is a need and what is a necessity. Then in that case, they would say that haram li ghayri is allowed. And so that's the reason why they say, and the need that they assess, the scholars assess today, is the living without credit history today and without a credit score makes life very, very difficult. Now, if someone wants to follow that for their personal practice, then of course that's very virtuous. However, to compel an entire society to follow that would make getting a cellular phone agreement difficult, renting a car difficult, leasing an apartment, or buying a house. They would make these things impossible, right? Along with many other things. So that's an example of how understanding why the scholars hold what they hold. So that first person who's influenced by a very conservative background will say, "Oh, these scholars are all sellouts. Look at what they're saying. They're trying to make the haram halal."
Yeah.
But when you understand why they said this, because it is not haram in itself, it is haram due to other cause. So there is some precedent in the Islamic legal tradition for allowing that on basis of necessity or need. Then they'll begin to appreciate the scholarship of these scholars. I don't know if that.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, that was great. So is this difference of opinion built into Islamic law? Is it a feature of Islamic law, like this ability to have ikhtilaf? Or is it kind of is like, so the layperson may be just like, why doesn't Islam just give me the answer? Like, why isn't there just one answer for everything? Just give me halal or haram. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it with is this what Islam is meant to be? Or is Islam meant to be this legal, I wouldn't say because like legal, just give general legal guidance and leave it to the scholars to kind of navigate it?
So look, the reason why there is this complexity and this nuance is because Islam thrived as a civilization for over 1,000 years, and as a civilization, the needs of people, are so endless. The scholars, they actually have this beautiful statement. They say, النصوص متناهية والوقائع غير متناهية. The number of texts that you have in the Islamic legal tradition are limited. There's a certain number of verses, a certain number of hadiths, but the possibilities in people's lives are endless.
Yeah.
So that's why we have ijtihad,
Mhm.
the ability to address what hasn't occurred using the authentic sources that we have at hand. So if it wasn't for ijtihad, Islam would have quickly become outdated, but it's from Allah's wisdom that He made Sharia very dynamic,
Yeah.
where it could continue to remain relevant to the circumstances that come up long after the Prophet ﷺ's times. So I would caution that the people who have that type of simplistic attitude, they want a yes or no answer. That type of logic would make living according to Islam impossible. Imagine if I reduced the teachings of Islam to 7th century Arabia.
Yeah.
How on earth am I going to do that?
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
Yeah.
And it was never meant to be like that. That's why, we have the Prophet ﷺ telling the different emissaries that he sent to the different locations. Like when he sent Sayyidina Mu'adh to Yemen, he said to teach them according to the Quran and then according to the Sunnah. And if they were to ask you of something that is not in either of these, what shall you do? He said, "Ajtahidu ra'yi wa la alu." I will exert my efforts in arriving at an authentic opinion, and I'll not leave any stone unturned, so to say.
Yeah, so subhanAllah, it's a built-in feature, right? Like the Quran purposefully does this. And I remember especially when I was dealing with a lot of the Shabab in New Jersey, some of them would come up to me and they would say, well, weed isn't in the Quran, so is it halal, right? But then the Quran gives you enough, like it'll speak about intoxicants, it gives you enough, just one example, to be able to extend that to hundreds and thousands of scenarios, that anything, even the Prophet, he said, whatever intoxicates a little bit is a lot, is haram in a little, right? Is haram
Yeah.
in small quantities. So the Quran will give you these tools, we can say, or cases that can then be extended. But even then, it's not going to have a qiyas for everything, but there will be enough in the Quran and the guiding principles of the Quran where the scholar can do this ijtihad. Otherwise, the Quran would be
Yeah, and then the other thing again, like there's not going to be so there's something called mutawatir,
yeah.
something that is has reached a level of knowledge that it's well established. There's no two who differ about it. It's
But
something
the
that is
Quran's
ma'lum min ad-din
authenticity is
bil-darura.
mutawatir, right?
Huh?
The Quran's authenticity is mutawatir, right? The five daily prayers, those are examples of mutawatir, right?
Exactly. Like you're not going to find, like, there isn't like two opinions about alcohol. Some say it's not too bad, and then others say it's haram.
Yeah.
There's not going to be that. It's something that is qat'i. It's there's it's very explicit. It's not subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
But most of the deen is not like this. That's why they say al-fiqhu min bab al-dhunun. Fiqh is largely based on probability, on human efforts, right? And that's okay. Allah Azza wa Jal made it so that there is the things in our deen that are fixed, and there are things that are mutaghayyirat, ثابت المتغير, that are variables. Even when it comes to Quranic interpretation, they say that al-Qur'anu hammalu awjuh. The Quran is subject to interpretation. And that's just a reality of understanding language, and the reality of comparing evidences. And it reflects the human condition. There's no two minds that are absolutely identical.
Yeah.
Our foundations will be very similar, but I'm informed by many different things. In terms of my decision making, my surroundings and my upbringing, and my knowledge of this and that and the other. All of these things inform my decision making. So Allah Azza wa Jal has created us in that way where there's so much diversity. Why don't I expect it to be in my deen? It's not a bad thing at all. That's why there's a hadith, even though it's the authenticity is disputable, but it's been accepted by the ummah by consensus. اختلاف أمتي رحمة. The difference of opinion among the members of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in matters of furu', matters of secondary issues, is a rahmah, is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if it was just an easy yes or no, well, what if you can't do the yes, or I don't want to do the no? So wallah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Even in the Quran, there's a verse that says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا, right? And usually it says, don't be like those who broke apart and differed. But usually differing comes before that, right? First you differ and then you break apart, which kind of indicates that the problem is not the differing, it's the breaking apart, right? I guess this is a very important thing, because something that frustrates people about learning Islam is they get frustrated with this ikhtilaf, but it's actually a source of rahmah for the person. I think especially in the West, right? Like we have so many unique situations that are not in the Muslim world, right? Like you said, I mean, credit cards are all over the world now, but credit cards, maybe our mortgages, maybe our political situation, voting, all of these things are unique, right? Can you shed some light on maybe seeking a fatwa or guidance on something that is unique to our culture from a scholar that knows our culture, who lives in it, versus someone who is, let's just say, abroad? And when should we take a fatwa, let's just say, from someone abroad versus someone here?
I was actually asked a question recently that I guess relates to this. Someone asked me about leasing. They asked their scholar from back home, and their scholar said, "Well, no, it's going to be based on a case by case situation. I need to see the contract and the agreement and the way it works to tell you if it is allowable or not." And especially since there's this thing that they call money factor in it, there's an interest. So when it comes to leasing the interest, that's haram, right? The actual response to this is what they call interest is not always what we call riba. So
Yeah.
if you do not understand how a lease works, then you will think that riba is possible in it. But that there is no riba in leases, because it's not a sale, and it's not it's not a loan per se. It's a rental agreement with the option to buy in the end of the period. In that, even if they could call it interest all they want, it's not
Yeah.
our riba. So that's an example of something that will definitely puzzle the mind of someone who's not inserted in our reality and doesn't know about these types of agreements. And well, if you see the word interest, that must mean riba, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not always the case. There's other examples where the word interest is not necessarily equate to riba. But yeah, in general, I would say the scholars have made it part of the conditions from ijtihad for the person who is issuing a fatwa to be knowledgeable of the circumstances in society. Because we have two things, right? There's fiqh and then there's fatwa.
Yeah.
Fiqh is a theoretical assessment of evidences and arriving at conclusions based on that theoretical assessment. Fatwa is circumstance based. It draws from the conditions of that individual that you're giving a fatwa to and the reality that they're in, and how tanzil al-ahkam, or the application of law, would be in that type of situation. So that's what fatwa is. There's no way that someone could give a fatwa that is cookie cutter, applicable in all types of situations. That's not really a fatwa, unless we're talking about something that is ammat bihil balwa, and we're talking about something that is general hardship for all of the people of our times. But again, like the fatwas that are just given without actually understanding the details of the reality and the circumstance. That's why they say they have this principle: fatwa la tu'ammam. A fatwa cannot be generalized. A true fatwa, is something that is applicable to the questioner himself. If he shares that with another, well, that other person's circumstance may differ, which may cause the ruling to differ. So so that's what I would say about that. If someone's far removed from the American reality, then they're missing one of the conditions that would allow them to give fatwa.
Yeah, so therefore the average American should be careful in getting a fatwa, especially about like we're not talking about like Salah or Umrah or Hajj. We're talking about something that's specific to uh, American context.
Of course, and by the way, like some of these things, they're not necessarily fatwa per se. Even religious guidance.
Yeah,
When you're coming from some of the countries back home, you may find like I guess you could say certain practices of the deen dominant in different areas,
yeah,
where it won't lead to necessarily the type of friction that would come about in like our very diverse reality. So sometimes the advice that's given on addressing like things even relating to creed or matters of community practice and community building, very very awful, because it's not considering the amount of diversity and the complexity that it is in our masajid, in our communities.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is a good point. So, are you like alluding to something, for example, where in one country they'll follow a very specific madhhab or something, and then having that being applied here is just completely it's different because you have people from all over the world, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. So that um, uh, you know that type of difference often leads lay people, people who don't have a background and expertise, to condemn things they should not be condemning,
yeah.
because the scholars who are
Give
giving
me
them this
an
advice, huh?
example.
Things relating to like um,
I'm sorry, you're muted.
sorry, I clicked the
Yeah,
button by accident.
no worries.
Like things relating to the Mawlid of the Prophet ﷺ, for example, how to experience that and benefit from that. You may, and this is on either side of the spectrum. You might find statements that are shared from back home that cancel out a difference of opinion and cause a lot of division. Where when you approach the holistic tradition that we have, you will be able to have a much more seasoned approach that doesn't lead to so that's relating to Mawlid, relating to moon sighting, for example, versus scientific calculation. We're talking about the beginning and end of Ramadan, and relating to those types of issues that affect us community wide. They need to be addressed in a very thoughtful way,
Mhm.
and someone who's into wherever of our reality is not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. So, Sheikhna, at the same time, I think that in there's this maybe growing trend where there's this people have a respect for the difference of opinion in America, maybe more so than other places. But where do you draw the line with this, right? Because sometimes you'll have fatawa shadda, right? Like odd and a fatwa that goes against the vast majority of tradition. Um, where do you draw the line? How can the layperson recognize, for example, that something is out of bounds in Islam? So there are some things, for example, like I'm just giving an example, like a woman leading salah, right? Something like this, where maybe someone can find something in the tradition, right? Maybe they find a call from a scholar in the past, or something in the hadith or a tabi or something like this, but it goes against the general trend. So how can the layperson recognize, all right, this is where the boundaries of difference are now, we're gonna draw the line here, right?
Mhm. Yeah, Jazakallah khair. So I personally think that the layperson on their own is not going to be able to make this decipher, be able to decipher this type of thing. It's going to require the local scholarship to, I guess, provide direction and guidance to the community on how to address these issues in a constructive way, not in a destructive one. So how do I know what is shadh and what isn't? Well, like in the example that you gave, like with a woman leading salah, well, yeah, perhaps that would be something that has become common knowledge,
Mhm.
where that's not like something that we would fall for, because that there's like it's like something that is known to the basic and
Yeah.
to the but how to address it meaningfully, I still think that would be done by someone with scholarship and religious background.
Mhm.
So where do I draw the line in terms of what's acceptable difference of opinion? Where the scholars drew the line. If the scholars marked something as shadh, then then that discredits it in my books, because
Mhm.
but if I don't have access to know what they have
Yeah.
considered bad, then what am I going to do? Like in this type of situation, well, why is there this reality coming about? Is it influenced by Western philosophical values and subjects of feminism?
Mhm.
Is there an alternative that would give our sisters fulfillment? Like if sisters were to gather together in Ramadan to do tarawih on their own, is that something that's considered aberrant or a bid'ah? No, that's not. That's an alternative for sisters who have knowledge and scholarship. To lead each other in prayers, and to teach each other, and so on and so forth. But yeah, like again, like the way to address this meaningfully is also going to require, because again, this could become a deterrent for someone who doesn't know about Islam. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, why is this the case? All right, well, you guys have this thing called ijma'. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why can't a female lead Muslims in prayer,
Mhm.
and males in prayer?
Yeah.
So I think addressing it thoughtfully is going to still require scholarship, but steering clear of it. I would draw the line at figuring out what the scholars have categorized as shadh opinions.
Yeah. Uh, Inshallah. I have just a few more questions for you, like maybe like two or three questions. One is a lot of lay people, they ask this question like, what is a madhhab? Do I have to follow a madhhab? Can you give us a brief answer, I guess, to this question?
Look, if you're not invested in learning, then I would say then your madhab is the madhab of your mufti.
Mhm.
They say العامي لا مذهب له إنما مذهبه مذهب مفتيه. Whoever your local teacher imam is, should give you consistent responses. Will they give you consistent responses? I have no way of
Yeah.
ascertaining that. Inshallah they would. However, so someone who's not invested in learning is not going to get exposed to the subject of madhahib.
Mhm.
Anyone who is a seeker of knowledge, a student of knowledge, what I advise is studying a madhab, because it gives you a good view of what fiqh is all about. When you try to learn it in its complex form with all the differences of opinion and evidences, you will not be able to digest it.
Yeah.
So the best way to digest it is to study a madhab and then be able to branch out from there when there is need, for certain issues and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily apply what's in the madhab on all issues, every issue,
Mhm.
without exception. The scholars themselves of the past, they said, for those who find difficulty in applying certain issues from the madhab, then they can seek the opinion that allows. Not to mention, it's people think that madhabs are rigid, that there's one opinion and everyone has to follow it. That's not
Mhm.
what a madhab is. Madhab is, we're talking about generational scholarship, and there's a lot of diversity in the madhab and different viewpoints, and it's quite to the contrary. So someone who's looking at madhab from far away is going to say, oh, what are we going to become, like a cult? Everyone has to follow one opinion and that's it. One individual. You're a Shafi'i, so you're just going to follow Imam Shafi'i.
Mhm.
But that's going to come from someone who's ignorant.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think the general understanding of a madhab is that, I mean, the misunderstanding is that you're following the opinion of Imam al-Shafi'i himself, right? Where in actuality, you're following generations of scholars, and sometimes the opinion of the madhab is not the opinion of the founder of the madhab, right? And that's often the case in, for example, in the Hanafi school, you have the two students of Imam Abu Hanifa and so on,
yeah,
uh, where it is generational scholarship, right? And they're following a methodology that is leading them to a conclusion.
yeah,
And this is essentially what it is, and it's been tried over and over and over again, and they're reaching somewhat similar conclusions using the same usul, right?
hmm
I guess I want to ask a question about something you said earlier about the differing opinions. Is that can someone, for example, the average layperson, he goes to Masjid A and he gets a fatwa, and he goes to Masjid B and he gets another opinion. Can he follow in there? He trusts both scholars. Can he follow the one that's easier for him, or is there some kind of problem with this?
yeah. So Jazakallah khair. So there's one thing that we seek to avoid when it comes to following different opinions, and that is talfiq, which is fatwa shopping. I don't want to be someone who's driven by whim when I'm seeking answers about the deen. So I need to be very careful not to become that person who goes and asks sheikh after sheikh until I get the opinion that suits my desires.
Mhm.
So this is what we call fatwa shopping or talfiq. Talfiq. And this is prohibited.
Is the same
Especially
thing as fatwa
when.
shopping,
Huh?
Shaykhna? Is talfiq the same thing as fatwa shopping? Because fatwa shopping, from my understanding, is that you're going and you're just asking different opinions, whereas talfiq is you're mixing opinions. Am I correct, or am I?
Yeah. You're correct. So an example of talfiq. So I guess it's a type of fatwa shopping. So I go to the Hanafi school and I find something that appeals to me. We used the example of traveling earlier. I find something that appeals to me with their 15-day window.
Mhm.
That sounds great. It makes
Yeah.
my life a lot easier. And then
Mhm.
I find something that appeals to me in the Shafi'i school with the subject of combining.
Yeah.
So again, I'm going to combine both of these. I'm going to say, oh, this is a legitimate opinion here. This is a legitimate opinion there. Just like someone who's shopping is bringing one thing out of this aisle and another thing out of that aisle, and I'm gonna come up with my own product in the end, my own set of
Yeah.
opinions that I'm following that neither opinion states. So, but yeah, you're right. Fatwa shopping is more general. This talfiq is a
Kind
type
of
of.
using the same issue, right? You're using the same, like shopping in the same issue. So I'm going to take this from traveling from the Shafi'i madhhab, this from traveling in the Hanafi madhhab, and that from the Maliki madhhab, and you put
Yes.
together your own. You're making your own new recipes.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna become a person who shortens and combines after 36 miles, which is what the Maliki madhab says, and I'm gonna combine like the Shafi'i school says, and I will do it for 15 days like the Hanafi school says.
Mashallah.
Uh,
Good.
uh,
Subhanallah. So, but otherwise, other than that, let's just say it's not talfiq. Let's just say that, they find an opinion in the from one scholar. They don't even know. They don't even know is it the Hanafi or not, right? They just go to one scholar and he says,
so
but
when
there are.
it, yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
So when it comes to the layperson is not going to be able to avoid talfiq
Yeah.
because they don't know who said what. But the words are to the scholars or the teachers. Make sure that when you're giving an answer, that you're not doing talfiq for a person, that you're not doing the fatwa, you're not doing the talfiq for them. Um, yeah, but I agree. Like as a layperson, you just need to be consistent, and so fulan is your sheikh in terms of your fiqh. That's where you get your fiqh answers from. Be consistent with that,
Yeah.
so that you don't end up. But ultimately, I would personally advise like everyone needs to study a course on fiqh when it comes to worship. You should try to invest the time and get to the point where you don't need to just completely rely on asking your individual questions to a person. Study it as it is, and it'll provide much more better results for you. Wallahu alam.
So, yeah, one last question. There's a rise in call for collective ijtihad, right? Doing ijtihad through like fiqh councils, and I know in America we have AMJA, the American Muslim Jurist Association, the Fiqh Council of North America. Do you think that this is something that is this the average person? Let's just say there's an issue that arises, like for example, mortgages, right, or life insurance, or car insurance, or something like this. The person may go to a few individuals and they may have gotten different answers. Do you think that it's safer for the average person if they have access to these types of fatwas from these fiqh councils to
Yeah. Yeah. So
and,
look. Sorry.
and
Go ahead.
are there certain issues you feel that need to be collective ijtihad versus individual that we're facing today?
Yeah. Sure. Jazakallah khair for bringing that. So I think that there are certain issues that the opinion of individual imams should not be relied upon. The bigger issues that face the general Muslim community that should not be left to a sheikh in a local community to decide. And I personally, follow the same thing. In my personal practice, when it's a bigger issue that faces the community as a whole, I go to these fiqh councils and I see what the answers that they're producing are. Because it's not just like one of those types of things where you open a book that's 1,000 years old and get an answer from it.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I would say that the bigger issues that are like nawazil that are affecting the entire Muslim community in our times should be left to the fiqh councils to issue results, because when they give these conclusions and these these fatawa, there's a lot of research behind it. So each of the scholars writes a paper on it, and then they debate it and go back and forth until they arrive at an answer. So it's much more rigorous and studied, and you're more likely to find an authentic, consistent answer when it's done in that manner. Wallahu alam.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic, or?
I think we covered a lot of stuff. MashaAllah, is a very blessed hour. Jazakallah khair. I enjoyed the time with you, Dr.
Yeah.
Imad. May Allah bless your efforts. Allah yataqabbal minna jami'an.
I mean, same. Jazakallah khair. I found it very beneficial myself, and inshallah, I hope to sit with you again and maybe pick your brain some more about the issue of fatwa and fiqh. And again, for the person viewing, Shaykh Osamah is a gem in our country, in our community. SubhanAllah, just depth of knowledge, and someone I always resort to when I have a question on anything related to Islamic law in our Muslim community. So again, Jazakallah khair for taking the time to be with us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. You as well.
Wa yakum.